Así arranca la tercera parte de este programa, el Es Esto, la fábrica del día de hoy, esta sección, esta parte del programa en donde pensamos, redefinimos, repensamos, todo lo que tiene que ver con la industria de la música, una actividad que hace un puñadito de años nada más precisaba de barcos, de aviones que distribuyan de un lado al otro del planeta Tierra todo lo que tenía que ver con la industria del arte, desde un vestuario de cine hasta pasando por filminas, lo que se te ocurra. Todo eso ha cambiado en un puñadito de años nada más, y para hablar de todos esos cambios es que nos nutrimos de diferentes diálogos. Hemos hablado con productores musicales, hemos hablado con artistas, muchos artistas, como es el caso del día de la fecha, donde nos vamos para Polonia para hablar con la amiga MISIA FURTAK, que ya está conectada con nosotros. Hi MISIA, how are you? Are you listening me good?
Hey, good to hear you guys. Thank you for having me.
No. Sí, ya está. Beautiful voice. We can finish the interview. You have a lovely voice. It's incredible. Wow.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now, thanks for your time, for your support. We are going to start with the interview. We are live. Sometimes I'm going to make a little translation for the Spanish listeners. So please tell us your full name, where are you from, and how old are you?
My name is MISIA FURTAK. This is basically my name. MISIA, so my artist name, is an abbreviation of my real name. My name is Michalina, which is Michelle. So that's just basically what my name is. I'm based in Poland, but I used to be based in Denmark and in the Netherlands. For many years, I traveled around. I studied in the Netherlands, and my first band was formed in Denmark and was international. So I actually have been based many places, and I'm based in Warsaw in Poland now, but I have this, traveler attitude, so I like to move around.
Beautiful. Sorry the question, but how old are you?
I'm 40.
Perfect. I'm over 40, so it's okay. No problem with that. Bueno, estamos hablando con MISIA FURTAK. Ella es de Polonia, pero estuvo mucho tiempo viviendo en Holanda, en los Países Bajos. Y es una persona que ya se está definiendo como muy que viaja un montón. Tuvo la oportunidad en Dinamarca, de hacer su primera banda. Así que está ya. Estamos hablando con una persona que viajó un montón. Can you tell us, MISIA, bueno, también explicó su nombre, que MISIA es su nombre de escena, es una abreviación de su nombre personal, de su nombre auténtico. And can you tell us which is your first memory of you listening to music?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I think the first ones is when I was maybe, probably around 5 or so. I know that I listened to music. There was a lot of music in my home, but I can't remember that. I remember when we started getting first tape players. That I remember because apart from music, it had the technology behind it. So it was also fascinating that there's the machine, there's the tape moving and stuff, and you can rewind it, you can mess around with it. So I remember that, and I remember that was super exciting. And I actually remember thinking one day that it would be really exciting. We had this first tape recorder that you had to hold the button, push it left or right to rewind it or fast forward it. And I was thinking, man, that would be so amazing if you could just push the button and go look through the window. I wonder if it's going to be possible one day. And I remember that my dad bought a new tape recorder that day and brought it home. And I was like, oh my God, I did this. I made that. I'm a witch. What happened? So I remember that. But even on the small tape recorder, I remember listening to a lot of music, and we listened to a lot of radio also. So I can't really remember what was the first music I consciously heard or listened to, but it was definitely, when I was a couple years old, that I messed around with the tape recorder and listened to a lot of tapes. It was my dad's tapes. He listened to a lot of Phil Collins and Elton John. So the sort of classics, so to say, but that type of music, I guess, when I was just a few years old.
Classic, but with a high fidelity sound. ¿no? That kind of things.
Yeah, exactly, not lo-fi.
Perfect. Bueno, nos estaba contando que alrededor de los 5 años ella ya empezó con todo el mundo de los cassettes del padre y de música alrededor suya. Tenía un montón de músicas y estaba todo el tiempo jugando con la casetera, y cuando el padre trajo un tape recorder, un instrumento nuevo para escuchar sonido, ella se quedó también loca. Dice, ¿qué pasó con esto? Era lo que yo me imaginaba. Y dice que bueno, en esos cassettes que tenía el padre escuchaba mucho Phil Collins y Elton John, o sea, y que estamos de acuerdo en música de alta calidad de sonido. And can you tell us which was your first instrument and which was the first song that you learned?
You know what? I am not a classically trained musician. Like I went to a music school when I was a kid. So when I was 6, I went to music school and I started playing violin. So that was my first instrument. And then I started playing piano next to it. But I basically figured out pretty quickly that the system, like the music schooling system basically, is not really there to get your musicianship, maybe not your musicianship, like the musicality out of you, but it's mainly to train you as a virtuoso in a certain instrument in a certain area. So it was not my path, so I basically left. I started playing violin, then I played piano, and then they suggested that I should switch at the main instrument, so I switched to flute. But it was really not my thing, and I just stopped the school. And only when I finished high school, I started singing more. So then just basically my voice became my primary instrument. And when I moved out of Poland in early 2000s, I moved to Denmark to like this very specifically Scandinavian thing called the Højskole, and they have courses there and really whole campuses made for all kinds of social sciences, writing, philosophy, and artistic teaching. And I went to learn music there, and I met 2 other guys who were also, self-taught, very intuitive, and one was a drummer and the other one was a guitarist. So I basically started playing bass because that's what was missing, and that's the whole bass story in my life. So I started playing bass when I was like maybe what was it, like around 20 years old. And so basically my main instruments now is my voice and the bass guitar.
I love that. I have the same problem. I'm a bass player, and I have the same problem. When I was young, a friend of mine get the guitar and another get the drum, and they watch to me. They say, "Well, I play the bass." Kind of things. Sorry, the question is kind of personal, but when you were young, with which kind of people you meet? Like rock, punk scene, or where were you when you were young?
Well, when I was in high school, I was in a theater group, so it was more people. If it related to music, it was through like theater people, so it was not like heavy scene. It was more the inspired people reciting poetry and doing performance arts. But then when I moved out of Poland, I started playing with the guys who were very, like I said, intuitive, self-taught. And when we moved out of Denmark and moved to the Netherlands, our scene, it was like early 2000s. So our scene, I would say, was like the early indie rock scene. So it's not also like not the like old school rockers, so to say, like not like the leather jacket guys, but it was the indie scene. So like still like, guys and girls, although mainly guys with guitars, but the vibe was like the early indie rock.
Perfect. And we met some people that were in schools, and they say that it's more important that the training is more the social, no? The people that you meet. You agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely, because in that sense, like for me, I would think so that the only or the main advantage of being in a school is the environment that you create, but then you can have the environment without going to the school, obviously.
Exactly.
And I mean, of course, you can have the luck of meeting a fantastic teacher, and teachers and mentors are, absolutely super important. But then again, you can also have an older musician that you meet who like is your mentor without having the attachment to like a music academy of any way. So I was all the way very intuitive, looking up to people, trying to find my place in an environment and in a like bigger music community, but not related to a music academy.
Strictly perfect. Bueno, lo que nos estaba contando un poco de la historia de ella, bueno, estaba viviendo en Polonia y después se fue a vivir a Dinamarca, en Denmark, y ahí fue verdaderamente a donde conoció su voz, digamos, y empezó a tocar el bajo, porque también conoció a gente de todas partes del mundo, y un baterista y un guitarrista, y bueno, y ella empezó a tocar el bajo. Y lo que nos estaba contando también, que ella es muy intuitiva con la música, que está todo el tiempo buscando cosas, y que más que nada cuando ella estaba estudiando se volcó a una cosa más indie, no indie a lo viejo, sino un poquito más moderno en los primeros 2000, y que para ella es muy importante. Aparte de haber estudiado, ella estudió en un colegio, ella empezó tocando el violín, después el piano, y lo que ella decía que ella pensaba que el colegio directamente era algo muy estricto y que era más que nada entrenamiento, y ella estaba buscando otro tipo de cosas. También pasó un poco por el teatro y tenía amigos que recitaban poesías y con todo, o sea, eso es parte de todo el entorno que tiene ella. Una escuela de música, después en Polonia, después se mudó a Dinamarca y encontró un guitarrista y un baterista, y un poco de teatro cuando ella era adolescente, con gente muy creativa todo el tiempo alrededor. And can you tell us, in Poland and in Denmark, you have to pay to study music or is free?
You know what? In Poland, higher education is free, and in Denmark, higher education also is free. The school that I went to is not an academy. It's not a higher education school. It's something called a højskole, which is like a system where people usually go between high school and going to the university, and they pick something that they're interested in, and they very often go there to sort of try out whether it's really the path that they're interested in, or to explore things before they choose the one thing that they want to study. And that is a private system. You have to pay for these schools. So that one was paid for, but it was also very lucky because I went there around the time when Poland was like about to enter the European Union, and they had grants for the new European countries. So I applied to the Danish government to get a grant to go there to study, and I got the grant. So basically they paid for my school, so I didn't have to pay for it. And then when I studied in the Netherlands later, in the Netherlands you do have to pay for higher education. So that school was also paid for.
Bueno, nos estaba contando también todo ese proceso de haber estado en Polonia, en Dinamarca y en los Países Bajos, en Holanda, que en Polonia la escuela secundaria es gratuita, me dijo también que en Dinamarca también, pero hay algo que es entre la escuela secundaria y la universidad, que son como unas especies de proyectos que hacen para ver si la gente decide realmente cuál va a ser su carrera, que eso sí es pago. O sea, entre la universidad y el colegio secundario hay como si fuesen talleres o cursos que son muy específicos para ver si la gente quiere estudiar verdaderamente, quiere seguir con esa profesión, y eso sí es todo pago. Y lo que también nos dijo que en Holanda sí, toda la educación es paga. Y ella tuvo la oportunidad de, justo Polonia estaba por entrar a la comunidad europea, y tuvo acceso gratuito justamente porque estaba en ese proceso Polonia, y pidió como si fuese una beca, y el gobierno de Dinamarca pagó por todos sus estudios. Can you tell us the last personal question? Which was your first concert?
Oh, that I don't remember, and I think I remember the venue, but I'm not sure if it was that. I wondered about that because I can't honestly respond to this question because I just really can't remember. Usually when I have to answer a question related to my first something that is music related, I say what my first tape was that I bought for my own money, that I remember, and that I remember very well, and it's very surprising to a lot of people because I don't play very heavy music. Well, I started with indie rock, then I had, an electronic phase, a modern classical phase. For people who work for a while, it's kind of natural to, try different waters and see what works. But for my main, most of my career, I would say I played rather soft music, so it surprises a lot of people that my first tape was the Rage Against the Machine, which I love. That tape is just, until this day, it aged very well. I love that tape.
Yes.
It's basically, that album, the one with the burning guy, basically.
The sound of Tom Morello. It's still
Exactly.
alive. It's incredible.
So it's that's something that is super special to me, and I have a strong attachment to it. But I can't remember the first big concert that I went to consciously. I guess I just kind of started blending into it, and I first went to smaller or maybe theater-based performances, and then I went to I think it was in Warsaw, the first big concert I went to, and I think it was a rock band, but I really can't remember. It just started. I started going, and then I started going very often, and it kind of just melted in my brain into one big
Everything is mixed.
experience. Yeah.
Ajá. Muy bueno. Bueno, sorpresivamente le preguntamos por el primer concierto y no se acuerda muy puntualmente del primer concierto porque fue un montón de conciertos en un montón de lugares, pero sí se acuerda el primer disco, el primer cassette que se compró con su dinero fue Rage Against the Machine. Así que tremendo. Y dice lo que nos estaba diciendo que es real, que el sonido de Rage Against the Machine todavía sigue siendo actual. O sea, la guitarra de Tom Morello tiene un sonido súper particular que es él y sigue siendo muy actual. Así que esa es una de las primeras influencias que tuvo, pese a ahora estar tocando algo mucho más tranquilo. Misha, in 2013 you released your first album, Epka. How was the recording process of that first album?
Yeah, that was my first solo album. So before that, the album, the band that I mentioned to you, was formed in the school in Denmark. We actually played for nearly 10 years and released 3 albums together, and that was really what formed me as a musician and how I learned to to play, to write, to be in the band. It was really a formative time for me. So that was super special. And the last album that we recorded together, we just recorded live. So coming to your question, the first solo thing that I did when this band did, it was completely different because that was a studio album. So we did recordings in the home studio of the producer. The producer of that album is Leszek Biolik, and he is an ex-bass player of a band, like a big 80s, like a legendary Polish 80s band. He had a home studio, and we recorded most of the tracks there. Of course, apart from the drums and some bits and pieces that were recorded separately. But compared to what we did with the band just as a live band, this was my very first experience with making a completely studio album, completely, the opposite end of the scale.
And you were nervous. How do you get the sound of the bass? You get to the studio and you say, I want this kind of sound, or not?
Well, no, this was very much, I co-produced with Leszek the whole album. We discussed a lot of, the parts and making the arrangements. And it was, Leszek is a bass player, so he recorded a lot of the parts himself. I recorded some of the parts. He plays a Rickenbacker, so his sound is completely different to my sound. I have this ridiculously looking butterfly bass guitar, which is and I have flat wound strings on it. It's always very rubbery, and it just sounds different. It has higher output, and it usually is a bit darker. Like I have a Mustang bass as well, so that's more tone, and the butterfly is usually a darker sound as well. So it's just more particular. I actually played very little of the butterfly bass there. I mainly played, because Leszek played live with me and he played most of the basses there, but we had some songs where he played the lower main bass parts and I played some of higher melodies with 2 basses on stage. So it was a very, very different to what I did with the band. And basically the work on the album was a lot of like discussing, getting different people on board, deciding how we want to record the vocals. We went for something that I do very much until this day, which is recording the doubles, recording doubles and then moving them left, right, and like having the really thick voice tone. And I don't mean harmonies, but the main vocals. So like we did that on this album as well. So there was, it was much more than discussing the bass sounds. It was just actually the whole production.
Perfecto. Bueno, lo que nos estaba contando que ella venía tocando ya con un grupo, pudieron grabar 3 discos, así que EPCA no es su primera entrada a un estudio, y en 2013, bueno, lanzó su primer disco EPCA y tuvo un productor polaco muy conocido que también toca el bajo, que le ayudó un montón. Dice que el proceso de grabación fue más que nada discutir con él qué es lo que iban a hacer, y aparte este productor toca el bajo, como dije recién, y la ayudó un montón. Y aparte él toca en vivo con ella en este momento, y hay veces que doblan el bajo, que salen al escenario con 2 bajos. Él toca con un Rickenbacker las partes más oscuras y ella toca con su bajo, que es una mariposa, las partes más agudas, así que es una locura todo lo que es a nivel interpretativo, lo que suena cuando toca ella. Y bueno, y en ese primer disco hubo un montón tuvo un proceso de composición, digamos, bastante exhaustivo, porque fueron armándolo con un montón de personas, no solamente ella. In April of 2022, you released your last single, Restart. You changed many things in the recording process, or it was the same?
Oh, that whole thing was completely different, because this is like a bonus track. The last single, the Restart is like the last bonus track single to my album called Wybory, and that was a fully pandemic record. Ooh. Fully pandemic. So I recorded it remotely, only for the like bits and pieces of recordings when they, made the regulations easier, which there were times like that. So like I produced it with Albert Karch, and he was based in Denmark then. So I was allowed to go to Copenhagen once for a couple days, and then he came to Poland and he stayed in Warsaw for quite a long time actually. But it was allowed because it was already like, for a while it was allowed to travel within that period. So at least we could be together. But there are some absolutely hilarious stories related to this process, because, for example, an absolutely brilliant arranger, pianist, and a musician, his name is Christian Bolvik. He's a fantastic arranger. Like, he just conducted the orchestrations on the most recent concerts of Sigur Rós, and he was the player before in Efterklang, and he's a fantastic musician, really unbelievably talented guy. And he wrote 2 woodwinds arrangements for that album, and he was very excited about it as well. When he wrote it, he said he likes the songs very much as well, and he was asking us where we want to record the ensemble, and we were looking at each other on Zoom, also like looking at each other via Zoom, like asking ourselves, what ensemble? It's a pandemic. Like, we can't put the people together in the room. Like, how are we going to do it? And we really did a lot of research and like really exercised many like options in our heads, and tried to stretch things, but it was completely impossible. And in the end, we asked one of our friends from Warsaw, who's a saxophone player, if he knows any people, and he said, well, you know what, maybe I could just record all the parts myself. I think I can try. I play the clarinet, I play the saxophone, I have 2 different kinds. I'm not a big flute player, but I guess I could also play the flute. And in the end, we had the entire ensemble recorded by one guy in his home studio, because there was just no other way to do it. And it sounds good. Christian got actually pretty excited about it as well. He's like, okay, can I have his phone number? That's actually pretty useful to have a guy like that. But so that's Tomasz Duda. Big thank you again, and much respect for your big talent. But it was stories like that. So this, and we still did a lot of experimenting, because for example, we borrowed a bunch of microphones because we weren't sure in terms of the sound of the voice, how we wanted the voice to sound. So we did a lot of tests and like recording on different mics, maybe for different songs, what would work here, more air, more warmth, like a what do you call that? Like a
analog or digital, something like that.
Yeah, like with a lamp,
okay, sí, I can understand.
So like either a transistor or like a lamp or like a more vintage microphone. We did testing. So we still put a lot of, heart and thought into it, but it had to be done within the limitations of the pandemic, which was a very wild experience, I have to say.
Beautiful. I think that for musicians it was a crazy time because musicians have time during the pandemic, no? And when they ask, I think, no, this is a personal question, that when they ask musicians, where were you in pandemic? They say, I have a lot of time and I make a lot of music. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel, this is a personal question, about the feeling of time in the different countries? But, because I think, for example, in Latin America, Brazil, everything is slow, no? And in Denmark, I think that in Copenhagen they are running all the day, and maybe in Poland they are more quiet. How do you think about that?
That's an interesting question, because I do think that like time in many different locations can be perceived differently, but yes. I would there could be an aspect of nationality, but most of all I think it's the aspect of whether you're in a big city or a small city, because of course in every country, if you are in Warsaw, you're like, people from smaller cities in Poland, when they come to Warsaw, after an hour they're like, okay, I'm out of here. This is insane. Like I can't even walk down the street in my normal pace, and it just feels like everybody is running around me, which is and Warsaw is not New York, so like of course, like I guess the cities can have a different pace. I think there's something, I perceive Denmark as fairly quiet, as fairly calm, and that's because they do pay a lot of attention to work-life balance. They have this famous Scandinavian work ethic, that they don't respond to emails on weekends, they don't work on weekends, they have special in companies, corporations, they have a special budget that they are they have to use within a year, and that's a holiday budget, and if they don't go on that holiday, their boss calls them and says like, okay, what's wrong with you, are you okay, like you haven't used your holiday budget yet. So my brother lived in Denmark for 17 years, so I actually have a lot of examples like that. And I know that they take very good care of the work-life balance. So I don't perceive Denmark as a fast-paced country. But also, I know that certain people from some countries are more laid back and less, in my experience, I consider Americans, like I said, like my image, of New York, or like also, London is like that, like very fast paced, very like, we need to, chop, stuff needs to be done, work, I need to be at a certain time on the metro, or like in this place, we need to make an agenda to meet and stuff like that. So I guess it is like that, but also in my experience, sometimes the towns and cities are very different. So you're probably right, but I think it's more complex than only the national aspect.
Totally. Manu, ¿tenías una pregunta?
Sí, Misia, I want to hear the history about the butterfly bus you have. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. And it's really actually a very funny story, because when I started playing bass, like I told you the story, I had absolutely no idea how to play. I'm 100% self-taught, so I just took the bass and I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure this shit out. This cannot. People do this. It can't be too complicated. I'm gonna play bass now. So I took the bass, but I was incredibly nervous about playing the bass, and the fact that I had to sing and play, it was also super annoying because it stressed me out that I can't just sing, but I have to like pay attention. And I was absolutely convinced that people are looking at my hands all the time and checking if I'm, not making any mistakes, and I was a bit paranoid about it. So then I thought, okay, if I have to, if I had that, like to help myself, I might as well just get some ridiculous instrument. And then I know that if people are looking that way, they're looking at my bass and not looking at me playing. So like I kind of outsmarted myself that way. And I looked on the internet for like the most ridiculous like types of guitars. Most of them were too much. They were too much for me. So I was like, okay, I think this is a lost case. I'm not going to be playing some, whatever, ridiculous metal, weirdly shaped guitar or something.
Like VC Rich.
Yeah, exactly. But then I found this one and I thought, okay, it's either going to be horrible, like really ugly, and I just saw it online, and maybe when I receive it and I see it live, I'm going to be like, okay, this is like horrible, or I'm going to love it, and I think it's worth taking the risk. So I bought it online in the States. I bought it online from the Netherlands where I lived then. It was in the States. My friend agreed to pick it up, and then he sent it to another friend of mine who was in New York, and she took it to Europe with her as her luggage. And then where did she go to? I think she flew to Warsaw actually. So then from Warsaw, she shipped it to me. She sent it, but I think she mixed something up with the address and it got lost somewhere lost, and I thought it's already lost, but then they sent it back somehow. Like a month later it landed back in Warsaw, and then somebody was like coming to the Netherlands to visit us from Warsaw, and they brought it. So I think it was nearly 6 months after I bought it that I received it. So of course I laughed that I bought it new and I got it vintage. But it was really super special to get it, because I mean it's with me until this day and I still play it, and it's a brand, it's not, everybody thinks that it was like custom made for me. It was not, it's a brand. It was just this funny brand for like women and kids, and they make a lot of like really funny looking guitars, but it really works. I changed pickups in it, and I of course have to take care of it, and I have flat wound strings on it, so of course it changes the sound of it as well quite a bit. But I managed to kind of made it I managed to make it mine,
And still today you think it's ridiculous and ugly or not?
No, I never thought that. The first minute I saw it, I was like, it's either when I receive it, it's either going to be super horrible, because sometimes you see things on the internet and they look great on a photo, but then you get them and you're like, okay, this is like plastic and it's a toy, but I mean it's not an instrument. So when I ordered it, the first moment I ordered it, I was not sure. I was like, okay, it's going to be either or, but I'm going to try. So, but because it was also, for half a year traveling to me, I was already like, okay, probably I'm never going to get it. So whatever, I'll look for something else. But then I got it and I actually really liked it. So that's the story.
Perfect. I want to make you two questions. Where does your inspirations for writing songs come from, and why do you write in English and in Polish?
Yeah, my band was international, like I told you. So how I learned to make music, that was always in English, because it was the language that we communicate between us. We spoke English between us, so it was obvious that it's going to be in English. And for much part of my life, I lived abroad and I studied in English as well. And I usually, whenever I lived in like these expat communities where English was the main spoken language as well. So it was very natural for me to write in English, and I only started writing in Polish when I went solo. And I was anyway advised by my management to start writing in Polish. It was not my natural habitat to do that. But then, for example, the album that we talked about, the pandemic record, I wrote that about the political, the social situation in Poland. Which was also nothing that I planned to do, but it just became my reality from one day to the other. It was, the abortion ban and street protests, and every day for many months we were out in the streets protesting and stuff. And, when you're writing an album and, making music, and you then start to look for stories to tell on that music, and your reality is protesting on the street every day, you're not going to write it about, Christmas, because it's just not what your heart and your head is in at the moment. So I ended up writing it about the social and political situation in Poland. And so because it was in Poland and because I was using, some actual things that the politicians would say, I knew that I had to write it in Polish. So that was absolutely natural for me. But in general, now when I'm writing for the new record, it's a very difficult question because in Poland, in general, for the Polish market, it is said that, you should write in Polish because it's better. Like if a Polish artist writes in Polish, it's easier to reach the audience. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to be starting my writing process from that because, of course, I'm interested in reaching the audience, but I don't want to be strategizing the artistic process because that, it's just not, I think it should the way it should be done. So,
sorry, Misha.
Yeah.
My question about music was about that, about time. For example, a lot of musicians now make short songs because of Spotify or TikTok. That mm-hmm. was why I asked about time and if it was related to your music. I love what you're mm-hmm. saying.
Yeah. So I guess this story was, both responded to time and both to inspiration and
exactly.
also both to language in a way. So I guess I covered many of the things you asked about.
Exactly. See, I have that is personal to me because I love when I can't understand the lyrics, and then I search for the meaning, and I love to do that because sometimes when you are a music player, it's when you get in touch with the song easy, it's not comfortable, at least for me,
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that, and how do you feel about actual music scene?
Well, I have two ways of looking at it. I think everybody should be free to write in any language they feel comfortable with. So that's the main thing that I usually start from. And of course, I love all the different European languages, and I think it should be supported to perform in local languages. But also, it shouldn't be in any way discriminated against to sing in English if you are singing in your local market, because there should be space for both, basically. And that's something that I don't like that, for example, exists in Poland. We have the quota to promote Polish artists like the same way they do it in France, that they have a certain amount of Polish music that needs to be played on the radio, but it only works for Polish artists singing in Polish. So if you decide to write in English, you automatically exclude yourself from all the airplay that you could be getting. And I think it's a bit unfortunate because again, it influences the process. It actually, if you set a rule like that, it creates a system that creates a certain type of music that is written with the intention to be played on the radio.
Exactly.
And not with like, I'm gonna just let my flow come out. So exactly. I understand, that like local cultures need to be supported, local languages need to be supported, and I love, very honestly, really, I love listening to music also in different local languages.
Exactly.
But I also think that people should be free to write in any language they feel comfortable with.
I completely agree with that. We spoke with a lot of people from Canada that they are singing in French. I'm living in Catalonia now, and the problem with Catalan speaking, and it's all around the world. I completely agree with you. I'm going to make 2 more questions. How do you feel about social medias and streaming services?
Well, it's very tricky because social media, of course, it's a commercial tool, so it helps us promote, it helps us, be seen, but at the same time, people just think that it's a news platform, it's a way of looking at reality, and at the core of it, the way it's constructed, it's not a newspaper, it's a sales platform.
Exactly.
So I think the unfortunate thing is that it gets confused with that, and that people trust it with what is there, and sometimes it's just pure marketing. But it has helped me with communication with a lot of people, and it helped me discover mini music and festivals, and I mean it's a very helpful tool. Unfortunately, it's structurally confusing for many people, and it also doesn't have, you can just access it and scroll it and get the little rewards and pleasures for your brain and get addicted to it, and then that what becomes very difficult then to get out of, because it becomes a reality, and that can very much confuse you, like what everything is about, because it's really not about what's the reality on Instagram is, because I mean it's like you're living in a big shopping mall.
I think that is a big difference between Occident and Oriental, because we speak with a lot of Oriental bands, and they completely think that digital life is not life. They are only tools, and that I completely agree with that. And I think that you're in the correct way. That it's a little confused, everything in the social media. It's a complete disaster. I don't like that. And two more questions. Can you tell us something about your future plans?
Yeah. I'm working on a new album, so it's a very exciting time. And also, coming back to your question about language, it's super difficult for me to make that decision which language I should be writing in. And I started writing in English, then I started to write in parallel. So I tried writing at the same time, really the exact same meaning, in the same, to keep it within the same melody. And I experimented with that a lot. In the end, I don't think I'm gonna do it, because it's not for the best of the song, because sometimes you're trying to force the lyrics in the other language too much into the melody that you wrote for a different language. But I think that I don't have any date set for the album release yet, but I'm guessing that it will be like the fall of next year, the full album. And singles will most probably start coming out earlier, because we have a good part of the material pretty ready at this point already. I mean, it requires work still, but I'm pretty sure that we can start releasing singles earlier. So my plan for next year is to come back to playing a bit more and release an album. So it's very exciting.
Perfect. Maybe I can meet you in some concert in the Nordic.
Hopefully,
yes.
hopefully. I mean, I actually not a long time ago, I played at a festival in Spain called Pro Weekend. It's at not Valencia, but there's a music festival there and a conference. It's in Castellón de la Plana. I don't know if you know it, but it's very very small in terms of, I mean, Castellón, it's not your like first place like that you think of, like a festival or like a tourist destination, but it's they take very good care of their scene there. They invite great music professionals, and I actually went there because I played there because the year before I went there as a music professional, because I do work on gender balance in the music industry as well, and I'm actively working, collaborating with the Key Change movement, which also, if you're a female or female identifying person in the music industry, Key Change just released their new open call yesterday, which you can sign up for and maybe get into the new program. So I strongly encourage you to do that. So I went to Castellón to do a panel related to gender balance in the music industry, and that they ended up inviting me to play the year after. So that's what happened. So who knows, maybe I will be around here somewhere.
Incredible. I really like your kind of music. I'm over 40, and I love the kind of music from Massive Attack and that kind of things. And but now in Spain, everybody listens to reggaeton, and I don't particularly like that. So I hope that we can meet in a concert. The final question, just to finish the interview, we are going to play Transmisja in Polish. Can you tell us something about that particular song?
Yeah, that song, it's every song on that album has, I mean, maybe except one, but pretty much every song on this album has something to do with protesting. And that song, it's called Transmission, and what I say in this song is that when you unleash something important that needs to be sent somewhere else or that needs to be said, there's no way to stop it. And that was how I felt about the protest. It was about the energy that like got up in the air, and that it was a force that you could not negotiate with. And I say that like if you release the transmission, that's nothing that you can discuss with, and you have to listen to it. And I'm not adding any words to what other people say. I'm not guessing what other people are trying to say. It's just meant to be listened to. So that's what this song is about.
Exactly. When the message is honest and important, it can't be stopped. It's important what you're saying. I really like it. Thanks, Misha, for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and see you or speak to you very soon. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.